Thank you so much. Incredible organization, both. So 1 year ago, when Nick and I were working on the program for Accelerate OTT, we always look for an incredible blend of local and international stars to bring new perspective to our community. One of the referrals that we had was a woman named Monique Woodard, and we pursued her aggressively last year, but she was fully committed on the date that we had selected, but we never lost sight of her, and there's an incredible reason why. She is an early stage investor, former venture partner for 500 startups, founder and previous executive director of Black Founders, and really, as I can attest after having spent several hours with her, an incredible person and leader. She joins us from Silicon Valley tonight to deliver our keynote address, and we've asked her to share with you her experience, both as an investor and a technology founder, her role, her journey, and all of the incredible experience, lessons learned, and successes she's acquired along the way. She makes investments at incredible opportunities where there are big demographic shifts and new technologies that are truly going to influence our future. I'm going to invite her forward to share, as only she can, part of her journey with us tonight, and then we will open up the floor to all of you. Please join me in welcoming Monique Woodard.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Hi. Okay. I'm going to talk for a little bit about who I am and what I do, and then I would love to hear from all of you, because I believe that you all probably have really good questions, and you want to hear hopefully you want to hear my answers to those questions. But I'm going to start by telling you just a little bit about how I ended up where I am today. So I'm a venture capital investor, and I live in San Francisco. My portfolio is 50% women founders, roughly 68% underrepresented founders of some sort, which means women, LGBTQ, Black, Latinx founders. And I didn't go in necessarily optimizing for that kind of output. I actually found out those numbers only after I, already made the investments, and I crunched the numbers, and there you have it. But those were the people who were building the types of companies that I really cared about, like Wendy, who is the CEO and founder of a company called Silver Nest, which helps seniors share their homes and stay in their homes longer as they age and get older. Or Stephen, Nuria, and Susie, who are the founders of Encantos, which is a multicultural kids media brand that partners with other brands like Nickelodeon and Viacom. Or the founders of Court Buddy, who started a legal tech service that helped people who didn't have access to legal representation partner with solo lawyers and actually get legal representation. And so those were really the types of companies that I was and am still really attracted to. But I didn't start out as this VC who's been able to deploy capital into companies I really believe in. I started out as a founder. I started my first business when I was just out of university, and I really started it because I just enjoyed building things, and I had become sort of this self-taught product builder and coded just enough to make myself dangerous. And was really just intrigued by getting on the internet and building things and trying to make those things make money and build a real business out of it. My parents don't come from Silicon Valley. I grew up in the rural South in Florida. I come from a very entrepreneurial family, but they were small business entrepreneurs. They were farmers, and my dad owned a fish market, and my uncle started his own software business. I didn't have anyone. I didn't even know what a venture capitalist was. I didn't grow up knowing what a VC is or does. That's not something I discovered until I moved to San Francisco and finally discovered that there were people who would write you a check and tell you to go off and build your business. And that was like a wild discovery to me. But I got really good at building product, and it was something that I loved doing. And eventually, a company based in San Francisco knew of me and knew someone who knew me and asked to meet me and talk about something new that they were building. And so I flew to San Francisco. I met with them. I talked about what they were doing. And 30 days later, I drove across country and moved to San Francisco. And I tell you that story because it would have been so easy to say no. I mean, it was thousands of miles away from everything I knew. I had a great life in Miami. It was warm. And then I went traipsing off to San Francisco, where it was none of those things. But I said yes to something that would get me in the game. And I needed to move closer to the game in order to get in the game. And today, luckily, that was a decade ago. And luckily today, you don't have to move closer to the game. The game has been distributed so much so that you can start a really big business and grow it right here. Shopify has done it. You've got Element AI, who's also a great Canadian company, Urban Logic, one of my companies that's based in Vancouver. So you can start a great company anywhere and have a really big success story. So I got to San Francisco and I sort of immersed myself in startup culture. And, as one does, I decided to start another company. Because that's what I do. And so I built a mobile app called Speak Chic, and it was sort of right in the middle of the economic crisis, and I was going to have to go out to market and raise money for this fashion tech and e-commerce product in sort of the middle of that, right? And venture is incredibly cyclical. And so at the time, going into Silicon Valley and talking about fashion and e-commerce was not really the thing to do. Now you've got all of these direct-to-consumer brands coming up like Glossier and Article and all of these brands. But back then, e-commerce was not a hot area of investment necessarily. So I started that company. I really bootstrapped it for a very long time. And then I decided that it wasn't going to be a really big opportunity. So I wanted to do something new. And what I was noticing is that I would go to all of these pitch events. I would go to demo days. And I was the only person in the room that looked like me. There were very few women in the room, period. And certainly there were very few Black women in the room. Everyone was sort of this prototypical Mark Zuckerberg type of guy, right? And, I was noticing that, and my friends were noticing that too. And so one day we got together and we said, well, why don't we start an organization that will support entrepreneurs? And so we started Black Founders, and our mission was to see more successful Black entrepreneurs in tech. And we've had a lot of great success. The founders of companies like Maven and Soldsy, now Wonder School, we were able to really support a lot of those founders very, very early. And what I started to discover through founding that organization is that I could do all of the programming that I wanted to. I could have all of the programs on how to build a great pitch deck. I could do all of that. But unless I was able to actually touch capital and impact where the money goes, the impact of all the things that we were doing was extremely limited. And so I ended up on the investor side of the table. And a very unlikely investor. I really came to it with this thesis that, one, we were missing out on some of the best entrepreneurs by not having enough diversity on the investor side of the table. And even as of last year, there are only 170 female partners at funds worth upwards of $25 million. And that's 9% of the VCs at firms of that fund size. That's just still last year. And, I truly believe that in order to get access to the full breadth of talent and innovation and opportunity, you have to have many more different people on the other side of the table who are actually writing the checks. So I started investing in great companies like Silver Nest, who I mentioned before, and Blavity, which is a media platform for Black millennials. They just raised a Series A that was led by Google Ventures. Court Buddy was one of my investments, Urban Logic out of Vancouver, and really started putting capital to work in companies that I believe in. And, I think as you start to diversify the investors, you start to see venture capital looks a lot different, the successful companies start to look a lot different, and there is no true reason why women are funded at such a low rate, other than pure bias. A lot of people will try to tell you it's a pipeline problem. But that's not true. There are a lot of great women entrepreneurs out there, a lot of great women founders who deserve to be funded and to be funded at the same rate and level as their male counterparts. Just another stat that I'll throw out there. According to a study by First Round Capital, really successful venture capital firm based in the Bay Area, companies in their portfolio with women on the founding team outperformed all male companies by 63%. So why aren't more women getting funded? If we're all in this business even if you are a pure mercenary and you are only in this business to make money, then it stands that you should be investing all of your money in women founders, because that's what the stats tell you should do. But that's not what people are doing. And so I think of that as a great arbitrage opportunity, and a great opportunity to really support the women founders that I know can be wonderful and can be great and can be the next Katrina Lake from Stitch Fix, or can be the next Glossier, or can be the next The Real Real, or anything else that is doing just gangbusters. And so I'm excited to continue supporting women entrepreneurs and continue making the tech industry look a little bit more diverse day by day. And I'm also excited to kind of hear from some of you. I kind of got up here and I was like, I don't know that I have 35 minutes of stuff to talk about. But I know that everyone has a story, and I hope that my story is inspiring to you, and I hope that it's going to bring about some real good questions, because I think that we all have something to share with everyone in this room. So I want to very quickly open it up for some questions. I see Sonia moving to a microphone very rapidly. So get your questions ready.
I have the first one, because we had a great discussion last evening, and then I'm going to wander and find the next question.
Yes.
What would you truly say is the authentic state of investment for women in Silicon Valley?
Not enough. Still not enough. I think a lot has been done over the past few years in particular, because there's been such a big light shined on some of the bad behavior in the industry, some of the disparity in investment numbers. But I would say that still we're certainly not at parity, and we are certainly not investing in enough women fast enough. And so I always want more faster, right? And that also holds true when it comes to investing in women.
Hi. My name is Erica. I have a podcast. It's called Bad and Bitchy Podcast.
Yes.
And we We look at current events, current political events, pop culture, tech from an intersectional feminist lens. So we want to grow, we have all these ideas of how to grow it. And I have two questions for you. So we want to add a couple more to the docket because we see in this space that, number one, Canada doesn't really do pop culture. It doesn't really, you don't really see it in like Canadian publications or serious media, as they would say in Canada. And also the tech space in Canada is very much from a business perspective and not from an intersectional perspective. So for example, if you think about the rise of AI and who's using it, how does that affect people of color? How does that affect women? How does that affect LGBTQ plus people more so, especially with facial recognition and stuff like that? That is biased against us. So my question is, it's actually not on that. It's more on investing. So in other words, to grow and to be able to tell these stories, number one, my question is, what would be an optimal mix for podcast funding in terms of debt versus, finding investors? And what is the outlook for podcast funding?
So I think that audio as a category is really coming into its own. And I mean, you've seen the acquisition of Gimlet, you saw the acquisition of Anchor. So I think that audio as a category is really coming into its own. Voice and audio is something I'm looking at on a regular basis, and you're really starting to see an uptick in investment activity around the space. I think for an individual podcast, that's a very hard investment to wrap your head around because it is the individual podcast. So you need to figure out a way to get a little bit broader. Maybe it's a network of podcasts. Maybe it's podcast enabling. Maybe it's software related to podcast. Because I think, really drilling down into like, oh, we're going to do this one podcast. That's an interesting thing for people to listen to and for you to gather an audience around. But I think you need to get a little broader to build a business around it. I hope that answered your question. Good. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
My name's Eduardo. I have kind of a two-part question for you,
Okay.
if that's okay. So the first part is about equity management. Equity management.
Equity management, okay.
So if you could take your investor hat off and put a founder's hat on, and sometimes it's difficult, right? But if you were going to give, say, yourself the experience you have now, some recommendations 10 years ago, how would you balance sort of scaling the size of the company versus keep retaining the portion of the equity that you own yourself? So the whole throne versus the kingdom debate, right?
Yeah.
And the other side of that, the other part of the question that I wanted to ask you about was the recruiting the right team. Everyone says you have to have the right team to be able to grow your company. Okay. And a lot of people who are new entrants into the new founders, they can't get the talent they're looking for, the talent they need to scale, because they don't have the battle scars, they don't have the reputation, they don't have a successful exit out of a company. So how does a new entrant into the entrepreneurship space attract the right talent and make sure that they balance their equity as they try to grow their company into a multi-million-dollar venture?
Yeah, so
Is that
yes.
Yeah.
It's two very big questions. So I'll try to make a couple of like really quick points, but we could talk about that for like literally an hour. But when you're a small, scrappy, new upstart company, you have to figure out how to make people, how to attract people to what you're doing, and it's often by making it a movement. So it's not just going to work for a company, you're going to work for this movement. Now, if you're selling SaaS software to businesses, That's a little harder to do than in some other categories. But I think it's all about you as, do people want to follow you off a cliff? Do they believe in do they believe what you're selling? And are they willing to follow you into, the fire? Because startups are not easy. They're not like a 9-to-5, 40-hour-a-week type of thing. And so I would mine every resource I had. I would poach old friends from other companies. I would, poach friends of friends from other companies. I would try to mine every single resource. And I would also try to be thoughtful about how you're building your early team. Are you only sourcing from your immediate group of friends? Is there some reason why diverse founders might want to join your company early, especially if they might not be having necessarily a great experience in like a big legacy tech company? I would really try to make it as attractive for as many different types of potential employees as possible, and set yourself apart in that way. Like, can you make your company a really great place that women actually want to work? Because there are a lot of places that women don't want to work.
Sorry, and the equity part of the...
Sorry, so I forgot. How do you balance between building a big company but keeping some of it for yourself, keeping more of it for yourself, versus giving away too much equity? Am I restating it in that correct way? I think you have to decide what type of company you want to build. You shouldn't give away too much too soon. And sometimes in markets where venture capital is more constrained, I find that entrepreneurs have given away too much too soon. And that makes it really difficult for other investors to come behind and then invest in that company. So I would be really careful and cognizant of that. The second part of it is understanding that if you are taking on venture capital dollars, traditional venture capital dollars, and you really want to build a big company, understanding that, do you want to own 5% of a big company, or do you want to own 20% of a very small company? At some point, the math becomes such that you should own 5% of a really big company.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Palmer of EntreLaunch, and I have a question that's a little bit off from your financial part. Okay. I want to know, what is the biggest failure you've experienced, and how have you learned from it and overcome it, especially in the financial area?
Yeah, that's a good question. Only because I've experienced so many failures. Speak Chic was not like a huge success. I would have loved to have taken that as far as it could go, but I didn't. I definitely don't feel like I fundraised as well as I could have. I launched it at a really kind of crappy time to launch a consumer facing company in the e-commerce and retail space. So I think that was a big failure. Yeah, I would say that was a big one. But I think I tend to be the sort of person who just like, oh, you fell, get up, dust yourself off, and keep walking, And I think that's really important. That's what I look for in founders, like the ability to be really resilient and to just sort of dust yourself off and keep moving, in, a direction that gives you some momentum. Because if I'm 100% sure that when you just keep showing up, good things happen. And so as you just keep showing up, the more good happens to you. So it's really easy to quit when things get difficult, and to quit when money gets tight. Like, it's not easy to be a founder. Like, you will often go broke being a founder. But it's the person who like just keeps showing up and showing up and showing up who the good thing tends to happen to. And for sure, you have to understand when to cut bait, but don't do it before it's time.
Hi, my name is Dipali. I'm head of marketing for a public company in Ottawa, but on the side, I do invest into small-time tech firms. And this happened by chance and by being at the right place, but not everyone of us get those opportunities. So how do women like me who do have like jobs, but they also do side time investment, how do they get to those opportunities? And what are the 3 points or 3 tactics that you can, tell someone like me?
Yeah, so I think it's great that you're already investing in companies, and I think more women should do that. I see so many women having successful careers, and they could be angel investing and investing in other women, which is really important. But instead, they're doing something philanthropic, which is great too. But I think there's also a big need on the private company side to deploy capital to people too. So, one, I think women have to start to get more educated about what does it even mean to be an angel investor. And so there are certainly groups like Pipeline Angels. There are, I think there's Angel University, and there are all of these programs where you can sort of learn what it means to be an angel investor and to invest in companies, and how many investments should you do in a year, and how much of your capital should you allot to a fairly risky asset class, and that sort of thing. So I think getting yourself some education so that you can feel incredibly confident in going out there and supporting entrepreneurs is really important. And then the second part of it is, how do you find those great entrepreneurs? And it's by coming to events like this. It's by going to a local accelerator's demo day. It's by going to, if a friend of a friend is starting a company, talking to them about what the company is that they're starting. And I would say for people who aren't, who are just starting out in angel investing, I would probably optimize for the things you know best. If you've had a really great career in enterprise software, start investing in enterprise software companies. Like, don't go out and make your first investment a consumer company, because it's really hard to evaluate whether that's a really good deal or not. I think just being able to have that confidence to go out and understand that you are going to lose some, and be okay with that. Some companies are not going to survive, but as long as you have enough companies in your portfolio, you will, eventually some of them will hit, hopefully. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. I just want to thank you so much for being here and doing this today. It's awesome.
Thank you.
And so my question, I just recently was in a PR program in college, and they put a lot of emphasis on social media. So as far as, being the great outreach and way to network and talk to people who may be interested in what you're doing and find people to be on the journey with.
Yeah.
So my question is that I had heard 2 things. That one, in the early stages, that it was important to spend a lot of time doing, that kind of networking with people who have similar interests. And I also heard that Facebook is kind of a thing of the past. The focus in which I was, they're telling me, that it's phasing out, that not seen as relevant. The ones that were very promoted, at least in the recent program, were LinkedIn, YouTube audio that you talked about, and Instagram for the visuals. And my kind of 2-part question was, what were your thoughts on that? Like, what was your starting out, your philosophy with social media? Did you go hard? And how many, how many hours a day do you think is reasonable? Or because I find even sometimes 1 hour can be a lot of time. So that was my question. And thoughts on Facebook. Or
are you talking about it from a founder, an entrepreneur perspective, like someone who's talking about their company on social?
Yeah, like, so for you, when you were starting out, one of your original ventures, which I know would take so much of your time. That's a lot involved. So how much did you feel you really needed to give to social media on a daily basis?
It depends on your company, and it depends on the audience you're trying to curate. I think for a direct-to-consumer brand, for instance, it can be important to develop your audience on a platform like Instagram. Sometimes, as a founder, as an investor, you certainly want to kind of cultivate an audience on Twitter. However, that said, I think that most people should spend more time building product, less time talking about building product. And so, because of that, I would say spend your time wisely and spend the majority of your time actually building. And you'll be in cycles, like you'll be in a building cycle, and then you'll be in a more promotional cycle where you are trying to tell people about your product, get them excited about it, get them to buy it, use it, or get them to join your team, right? And so then social can become a really good tool in your arsenal. But I do see a ton of people like being way too active on social. I'm like, how do you guys have any time to do anything? You are tweeting about the most random and annoying things. But yeah. But it's for sure it's a great tool to use.
Thank you. That's very helpful to hear.
Hi. Thanks for being here. What would your advice be to a company who's bootstrapped over a year and a half and needs to raise money, and we have early traction, but when is the optimal time to start talking to early stage investors and angels to optimize our chances of success?
The optimal time is before you need it, right? I always say as a founder, you have one job, and that's to not run out of money. So if you're at the point where you feel that you have stretched the bootstrapping to its limit, then you should probably start to talk to investors about what you're doing and why it's a good, big opportunity. And so there is no optimal time. It's going to vary from company to company and depends on like how much time you actually want to spend bootstrapping it. But it sounds like you are sort of at what may be the end of that bootstrapping journey, and you need to start thinking about raising an actual round of funding. So I would say start yesterday. Yeah.
So I want to thank you for coming and actually bringing the diversity aspect to Ottawa. So we really needed that. So a lot of us are women here. There's some exceptional women in the room. What can we do for us here in this community to help grow and accelerate that rate of investment for women companies?
I think women investing their time and resources and capital into other women is how you start to sort of grow the cycle, right? So, women who are either executives or, CEOs, founders of successful companies, I would like to see them then going out and starting to invest in other women who are just coming up and just starting. And so kind of keep that cycle kind of moving, and as those women start to see more success, then hopefully they start deploying capital into women, and so you have this flywheel going of women being successful, using their capital, advising, resources, being very promiscuous with the introductions. Like, just introduce people to other people. Like, don't try to hold your introductions back, but really use them wisely and like introduce people to other people who can be helpful. So I think that's really important. That's how you do it. It's like you start that cycle, you start that flywheel moving, and then hopefully it continues to move and accelerate.
We're going to take one more question, and then we're going to move to our panel.
Thank you. I want to thank my sister for coming to Ottawa. Thank you so much for being here.
you.
I listened to, I have, I think, more of a comment than a question. I listened to, and I'm really happy to be here. I wasn't going to come, but I'm really happy that I came, so thank you. I'm so sorry, the president of Invest Ottawa, yes. I listened to you carefully, and I think, interesting for me as a Black woman, I think, when I heard you talk about the composition of the board, and it's ironic that on International Women's Day, it follows almost the same trajectory as the women's movement. First we'll have men, then we'll have women, and then the others. We're trying to develop more cultural diversity. You know, I live in Ottawa, and I know many, many, many women who are having small businesses, and the thought of investing or learning financial literacy or how can they promote their business is not even a part of the conversation. And I think if we're going to move forward, especially given the kind of political climate we have now, we have to think more moving together as opposed to some people getting through, then dragging some other people through. You know, I think we have to think more holistically, to use an overused term, into how do we provide programs for women who are doing small businesses? How do we educate? How do we validate? How do we get, you know, open the conversation to other companies or individuals who are thinking about investing? You know, so I'm kind of feeling that it's going to take Black women another 150 years. I heard a report recently.
I'm not waiting that long.
Okay, and I'm sorry.
I'm not waiting that long.
No, okay. No, me neither. But it says that Black women in Canada are the most underemployed women. And, you know, so I think that in terms of the bank being here and in terms of Invest Ottawa and the work that they're doing and the collective support for women in business, I think we start furthering that conversation so it doesn't reflect the women's movement in such a specific way. Thank you. And thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an excellent point, and many of our committee members that are on our subcommittee are right here. So we heard you loud and clear. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
And just as a resource available to all founders, absolutely any founder, we host every single day here at Bayview with Invest Ottawa through our Small Business Enterprise Center, courses, training sessions that are completely free. They are on our online events calendar every single day, and you can come and learn from the best women and men across this community and beyond, from our partners and other sponsors, the opportunity to tap into every facet of business. So we encourage everyone here to take advantage of that. With that, I'm going to thank Monique for her keynote address with us today. We were thrilled to bring her.